Every Sunday morning, rain or shine, Emily made her way to the small, quiet cemetery on the outskirts of town. It was a ritual she had kept for 5 years now, ever since the day her mother passed away in a tragic car accident. The drive there always filled her with a mix of sadness and nostalgia, but once she arrived, she felt a strange sense of peace. The cemetery wasn't crowded. Most people only came here to visit graves during holidays or special occasions. For Emily, though, it was different. This place was where she could feel closest to her mother. Her mother's grave was tucked away under the shade of an old oak tree. A simple headstone marked the spot, engraved with her name, birth date, and the words, "Beloved Mother." Over the years, Emily had brought various items to leave behind: flowers, candles, even photographs. Each offering was meant to remind her mother that she hadn't been forgotten. But today, something felt different. Today, Emily carried something deeply personal: a small, worn-out teddy bear. The teddy bear had been hers when she was a child, a gift from her mother on her 6th birthday. Its fur was matted in places, one of its glassy eyes missing, but it still held so much meaning. When Emily hugged it close, she swore she could smell a faint trace of lavender, the same scent her mother used to wear every day. She clutched the bear tightly as she walked along the narrow path leading to the grave, her footsteps crunching softly against the gravel. When she reached the headstone, Emily knelt down and brushed away some fallen leaves that had gathered around the base. Her fingers lingered on the cold surface of the stone, tracing the carved letters of her mother's name. "Hi, Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I brought you something today." She placed the teddy bear gently at the foot of the grave, positioning it carefully so it faced outward, almost like it was looking up at her. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as memories flooded back. She remembered how her mother would tuck her into bed each night, stroking her hair and telling her stories until she fell asleep. Sometimes her mom would sit beside her, holding the very same teddy bear, pretending it was alive and talking to her. Those moments were some of the happiest of Emily's childhood, and losing her mother had left a void that nothing seemed able to fill. As she sat there, lost in thought, Emily didn't notice the security cameras mounted high above on nearby lampposts. The cemetery had installed them years ago to deter vandalism, though they rarely caught anything out of the ordinary. Most of the footage ended up being mundane: people walking by, birds fluttering between trees, or the occasional squirrel scampering across the grass. Today, however, the cameras captured something unusual. Unbeknownst to Emily, this seemingly ordinary visit would soon become anything but. After spending a few more minutes at the grave, Emily stood up, brushing dirt off her jeans. She glanced one last time at the teddy bear, making sure it was secure, then turned and began walking back toward the parking lot. Her heart felt heavy, as it always did after these visits, but there was also a tiny spark of comfort. She liked to imagine her mother watching over her, even if she couldn't see or hear her anymore. As she disappeared from view, the cemetery grew silent once again, save for the rustling of leaves in the breeze. But what happened next was something no one, not even Emily, could have anticipated. Late that evening, when the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness enveloped the cemetery, the security cameras continued rolling. On the grainy footage, a figure appeared near the grave where Emily had left the teddy bear. At first, it looked like just another visitor, perhaps someone paying their respects. But as the tape played on, it became clear that this was no ordinary person. The figure moved without sound, its form shifting slightly as if it existed somewhere between reality and imagination. For hours, the mysterious figure stayed near the grave, occasionally bending down to examine the teddy bear. Then, just as suddenly, as it had arrived, it vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions, and a growing sense of unease among those who later watched the footage. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story that would challenge everything. Emily thought she knew about life, death, and the bonds we share with those we've lost. The days following Emily's visit to her mother's grave passed quietly at first. Life resumed its usual rhythm, with Emily going about her daily routine, working her part-time job at the local library, catching up with friends over coffee, and spending evenings curled up on the couch reading novels. But despite the normalcy of her schedule, she couldn't shake off a lingering feeling that something was different this time. It wasn't just the emotional weight of leaving behind the teddy bear. It was as if the air around her had shifted, ever so slightly, carrying an unspoken tension. It started subtly, a few oddities here and there that might have been easy to dismiss if they hadn't kept happening. One morning, while browsing through social media, Emily stumbled upon a post from someone who regularly visited the cemetery. The photo showed a bouquet of fresh flowers lying near her mother's grave, though Emily knew for certain she hadn't left them there. Puzzled, she scrolled through the comments where others mentioned seeing similar things, an extra flower or two placed neatly beside other graves nearby. Some speculated it was vandalism, kids playing pranks, or even caretakers tidying up. But none of these explanations felt right to Emily. Something about the way the flowers were arranged seemed deliberate, almost thoughtful. Then came the toys. A week after her last visit, Emily decided to return to the cemetery to check on the teddy bear. She wanted to make sure it was still safe and hadn't been disturbed by weather or animals. When she arrived, she noticed something strange immediately. Scattered around the base of her mother's headstone were several small toys: a plastic horse, a miniature car, and a doll dressed in faded clothes. None of these belonged to her, yet they looked familiar somehow, like relics from her own childhood. Her heart raced as she knelt down to examine them more closely. Each toy appeared well-loved, their surfaces scratched and worn, as though they carried years of memories within them. Emily's mind swirled with questions. Who could have left these items? And why would anyone bother placing random toys at her mother's grave? She glanced around the cemetery, searching for any sign of another visitor, but the place was deserted. The only sounds were the rustling leaves overhead and the distant chirping of birds. As much as she tried to rationalize what she was seeing, a creeping sense of unease settled over her. These weren't ordinary occurrences. They felt personal, as if someone or something was trying to communicate with her. Word of the mysterious happenings spread quickly among the cemetery staff. The caretaker, Mr. Dawson, had worked there for over 20 years and prided himself on keeping the grounds pristine. He'd heard rumors from visitors about misplaced flowers and unexpected trinkets appearing overnight, but he initially dismissed them as exaggerations. That changed when he personally witnessed one of the incidents. On his early morning rounds, he found a shiny red yo-yo resting against Emily's mother's headstone. It hadn't been there the night before, and there were no footprints or signs of disturbance in the grass. Perplexed, Mr. Dawson decided to review the security footage. The cameras installed throughout the cemetery weren't state-of-the-art, but they provided decent coverage of the main pathways and sections. Mr. Dawson sat in his tiny office, sipping lukewarm coffee as he fast-forwarded through hours of grainy video. Most of it was uneventful: empty paths, swaying branches, and the occasional squirrel darting across the screen. Then, late one evening, he spotted something unusual. In the dim light of dusk, a shadowy figure moved into frame near Emily's mother's grave. At first glance, it appeared human, walking slowly and deliberately toward the headstone. Yet something about its movements didn't seem quite natural. Its steps were too fluid, almost gliding rather than walking. Mr. Dawson leaned closer to the monitor, squinting to get a better look. The figure stopped in front of the grave and knelt down. From the angle of the camera, it was hard to tell exactly what it was doing, but it seemed to be interacting with the teddy bear Emily had left behind. After a moment, the figure stood up and stepped back, then vanished completely. No fading into the distance, no turning corners. It simply disappeared. Mr. Dawson rewound the footage and played it again, slower this time. Still, the result was the same. The figure was there 1 second and gone the next, leaving no trace behind. Shaken, Mr. Dawson called his assistant Clara into the room to watch the clip. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and apprehension. Clara watched silently, her eyes widening as the figure vanished from view. "That's not possible," she murmured, shaking her head. They debated whether it could be a trick of the lighting or some kind of technical glitch, but neither explanation satisfied them. Whatever they had captured on tape defied logic. Determined to get answers, Mr. Dawson decided to reach out to Emily. He remembered her from her frequent visits and figured she deserved to know what was going on. He pulled up her contact information from the cemetery's records and dialed her number. When Emily answered, he introduced himself and explained the situation as calmly as he could. "Ms. Carter, I'm sorry to bother you, but we've noticed some unusual activity around your mother's grave recently," he said. "I think you should come by and take a look at the security footage." At first, Emily thought it was a prank or some kind of misunderstanding, but when Mr. Dawson described the details, the toys, the vanishing figure, her blood ran cold. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him at the cemetery later that afternoon. As she hung up the phone, her hands trembled. She couldn't explain why, but deep down she already suspected who or what might be responsible for the strange occurrences. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that her mother might still be watching over her, reaching out in ways she never imagined. By the time Emily arrived at the cemetery, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grounds. Mr. Dawson greeted her warmly and led her to his office, where the security footage was queued up on the monitor. As the clip played, Emily's breath caught in her throat. There, on the screen, was undeniable proof that something extraordinary was happening. The figure moved gracefully, almost lovingly around her mother's grave. Though its features were indistinct, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity. It was as if the presence radiated warmth and care, qualities that reminded her so vividly of her mother. When the video ended, silence filled the room. Emily stared at the screen, her thoughts racing. Was this real? Could it truly be her mother trying to connect with her? Or was she letting her grief cloud her judgment? Whatever the truth might be, one thing was clear: the mystery was far from over. The weight of the security footage hung heavily in the air as Emily sat in Mr. Dawson's tiny office, her mind struggling to process what she had just seen. The grainy video replayed in her head like a loop, the shadowy figure lingering at her mother's grave, refusing to fade from her thoughts. It was surreal, almost too strange to believe, but deep down, Emily felt a flicker of recognition. There was something about the way the figure moved, the way it seemed to pause and linger near the teddy bear, that stirred memories buried deep within her heart. She couldn't explain it logically, but her gut told her this wasn't random or coincidental. This felt personal. Mr. Dawson watched Emily carefully, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. He had dealt with plenty of strange situations during his years working at the cemetery, but nothing quite like this. "Ms. Carter," he began gently, breaking the silence. "I know this must be unsettling for you, but I wanted you to see it because, well, it seems connected to your visits." His voice trailed off, unsure of how else to phrase it without sounding absurd. Emily nodded slowly, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk as if trying to steady herself. "I don't know what to think," she admitted finally, her voice soft but trembling slightly. "It looks familiar, like..." She hesitated, unsure if saying it aloud would make her sound crazy. "Like my mom." Clara, who had been quietly observing from the corner, leaned forward. "Do you think it could be..." she started, then stopped herself, clearly hesitant to finish the sentence. Emily didn't need her to say it out loud. The implication hung there between them, heavy and impossible, yet somehow plausible. Could it really be her mother? Was this some kind of sign or even proof that she was still around in some form? Determined not to jump to conclusions, Emily decided to take a closer look at the footage herself. Mr. Dawson rewound the clip and played it again, slower this time, allowing her to scrutinize every detail. As the shadowy figure appeared on screen, Emily focused intently. Its movements were fluid, almost graceful, and while its features remained indistinct, there was an unmistakable tenderness in the way it interacted with the teddy bear. It knelt by the grave, picked up the toy, cradled it briefly, and then placed it back in a slightly different position before vanishing into thin air. Emily's eyes widened as she noticed something she hadn't caught before. Each time the figure repositioned the teddy bear, it moved it incrementally closer to the edge of the headstone. At first glance, it might have seemed insignificant, a meaningless rearrangement, but to Emily, it carried deeper meaning. Her mother had always been meticulous, paying attention to small details others often overlooked. Could this deliberate placement of the bear be another clue? Another message? As the video ended, Emily turned to Mr. Dawson. "Can I take a copy of this?" she asked, her tone firm, despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. He nodded, and quickly burned the footage onto a USB drive, handing it to her with a sympathetic smile. "Be careful with this," he warned. "Not everyone will understand what you're dealing with." On the drive home, Emily's mind raced. She replayed the events of the past few weeks, the toys appearing overnight, the mysterious figure on the footage, the subtle shifts in the teddy bear's position. Everything pointed toward one conclusion: her mother was reaching out to her. But why now? And why in such cryptic ways? Emily knew she wouldn't find answers sitting at home staring at the USB drive on her kitchen table. She needed help. Someone who could approach this mystery with both logic and an open mind. That's when she thought of Mark. Her best friend since childhood, Mark had always been the practical one, the problem solver who approached life with a mix of humor and skepticism. He owned high-tech recording equipment for his freelance videography work, which made him the perfect person to assist in investigating the phenomenon. Plus, he had a knack for calming her nerves when things got overwhelming. If anyone could help her make sense of this, it was him. The next morning, Emily called Mark and explained everything: the toys, the security footage, her suspicions about her mother's involvement. To her relief, he didn't laugh or dismiss her concerns outright. Instead, he listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering reassurance. "Okay, Em," he said after a long pause. "This sounds wild, but I'm in. Let's go. Check it out tonight. We'll set up cameras and recorders, see if we can catch anything ourselves." That evening, armed with tripods, motion-activated cameras, audio recorders, and even a thermal scanner borrowed from a friend, Emily and Mark drove to the cemetery. The sun was setting as they arrived, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. They parked a short distance away and quietly made their way to her mother's grave, careful not to disturb the peaceful atmosphere. Working together, they positioned the equipment strategically around the area. Mark attached a camera to a nearby tree branch, ensuring it had a clear view of the headstone. He also set up an audio recorder on a tripod, hoping to capture any unusual sounds. Meanwhile, Emily placed the thermal scanner on the ground, aiming it toward the spot where the figure had appeared in the footage. As they worked, neither spoke much, both acutely aware of the gravity of the moment. When everything was ready, they retreated to a cluster of trees a safe distance away, settling in to wait. The hours dragged by slowly, filled with the quiet hum of insects and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, partly for warmth and partly for comfort. Mark sat beside her, occasionally cracking jokes to lighten the mood, though his eyes remained sharp, scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. At exactly midnight, the temperature dropped suddenly, sending a shiver down Emily's spine. The air grew thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. Mark glanced at the thermal scanner, which showed a sudden spike in heat emanating from the direction of the grave. "Something's happening," he whispered, his voice barely audible. On the monitor connected to the camera, they saw it, a faint, translucent figure materializing near the headstone. It moved slowly, deliberately, just like in the security footage. Emily's breath hitched as she realized it was holding something in its hands. The teddy bear. For a moment it stood still, gazing toward the camera as if aware of their presence. Then, without warning, it dissolved into the night, leaving behind only silence. Stunned, Emily and Mark exchanged wide-eyed looks. Whatever they had witnessed defied explanation, but one thing was certain: it was real. And it was only the beginning of unraveling the mystery her mother seemed determined to share with her. The sight of the translucent figure dissolving into thin air left both Emily and Mark frozen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The screen connected to the camera displayed nothing but the quiet, empty cemetery now. Yet the memory of the figure lingered vividly in their thoughts. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the monitor, her breath shallow and uneven. She felt a strange mix of fear and awe. Fear because the experience was undeniably supernatural, and awe because deep down, she believed it was her mother reaching out. Mark was the first to break the silence. "Okay," he said slowly, his voice low and measured. "That was definitely not normal." He glanced at Emily, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded, though her hands were trembling slightly. "I think so," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's just, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like she's trying to tell me something. Like she's here with me." Mark didn't respond immediately. Instead, he rewound the footage on the camera to review what they had captured. As the video played back, the figure appeared again, clearer this time thanks to the high-quality equipment. It moved with an ethereal grace, almost floating rather than walking, its form shimmering faintly in the dim light. When it reached the headstone, it paused, holding the teddy bear close for a moment before placing it gently back on the ground. Then, as quickly as it had come, it vanished. "This is unreal," Mark muttered under his breath, shaking his head, in disbelief. "I mean, I've seen some weird stuff in my line of work, but this takes the cake." Despite his skepticism, Mark couldn't deny the evidence staring back at them on the screen. Whatever they had recorded was real, and it was extraordinary. For Emily, however, there was no doubt in her mind about who or what they had seen. "That's her," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "That's my mom." Her conviction startled even herself. Part of her still wanted to question whether this could all be some elaborate trick of the mind or a glitch in the technology. But another part, the deeper, more instinctual part, knew without a shadow of a doubt that her mother was behind this. The way the figure interacted with the teddy bear, the tenderness in its movements, it was unmistakably her. Determined to find answers, Emily turned to Mark. "We need to keep going," she said resolutely. "If she's trying to communicate, we have to figure out how to talk back." Mark hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. I'm all for helping you get closure, but I don't exactly have a manual for talking to ghosts." His tone was lighthearted, but his expression betrayed his unease. Still, he nodded after a moment. "All right, let's try." Together, they brainstormed ways to attempt communication. Mark suggested using the audio recorder to ask questions aloud, hoping the figure might respond in some way. Emily agreed, adding that they should also pay close attention to any changes in the environment, temperature drops, strange noises, or shifts in the position of objects around the grave. With a plan in place, they returned to the headstone, positioning themselves closer this time while keeping the equipment running. Standing by the grave, Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to do. "Mom?" she called, softly, her voice trembling but filled with hope. "If that's really you, please let me know you're here." For several long moments there was no response. The night remained eerily silent, save for the distant chirping of crickets. Just as Emily began to doubt whether anything would happen, the temperature dropped sharply again, sending a chill through the air. The thermal scanner showed another spike in heat near the grave, and the audio recorder picked up faint, indistinct whispers. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. Mark adjusted the settings on the recorder, amplifying the sound. At first it was just static, but then, amidst the noise, came a soft, familiar voice. "My sweet girl." Tears welled, up in Emily's eyes as she recognized the voice instantly. It was her mother's, gentle, loving, and unmistakable. The words sent a wave of emotion crashing over her, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Mark watched silently, visibly, shaken but clearly moved by the experience. Encouraged by the response, Emily tried again. "Mom, I miss you so much," she said, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this? What do you want to tell me?" The whispers grew louder, though still difficult to decipher. After a few seconds, the voice spoke again, clearer this time. "I'm proud of you, my love. Keep going." Emily's knees buckled beneath her and she sank to the ground, clutching her chest as sobs overtook her. Mark knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Though he didn't fully understand what was happening, he could see how much it meant to her. When the whispers faded and the temperature returned to normal, Emily wiped her tears and stood up, her resolve stronger than ever. "She's guiding me," she said, her voice steadier now. "She wants me to keep moving forward." Before leaving, Emily noticed something tucked inside the fur of the teddy bear, a small folded piece of paper. Carefully, she pulled it free and unfolded it, revealing neat handwriting that matched her mother's perfectly. Written on the note were 2 simple sentences. "I'm always with you. Remember the dates." Beneath the message were 3 sets of numbers: 42, 31, 28. Confused, but intrigued, Emily showed the note to Mark. "What do you think it means?" she asked, holding it up to the dim light of the camera. Mark studied the numbers for a moment, scratching his chin thoughtfully. Could they be dates? Maybe anniversaries or something significant? Emily nodded, her mind racing. Her mother had always been meticulous about remembering important milestones, birthdays, holidays, achievements. Could these numbers correspond to specific days in her life? Determined to uncover their meaning, she tucked the note safely into her pocket and thanked Mark for his help. As they packed up the equipment and prepared to leave, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter had been overwhelming, yes, but it had also given her clarity. Her mother wasn't gone, not completely. She was still watching over her, offering guidance and reassurance in ways Emily never imagined possible. And now, armed with the mysterious note and the knowledge that her mother's love transcended even death, Emily knew she had to dig deeper into the past to uncover the message her mother was trying to send. The drive home was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Mark broke the silence occasionally with light-hearted remarks, trying to ease the tension, but Emily barely heard him. Her focus was entirely on the note in her pocket and the promise it held. Whatever the numbers meant, she was determined to find out. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope, a belief that her mother's presence was still alive in her life, guiding her towards something greater. The next morning, Emily woke up with the note still clutched tightly in her hand. She hadn't let go of it all night, as if afraid it might disappear if she did. The numbers, 42, 31, 28, were etched into her mind, their meaning elusive but tantalizing. Her mother's handwriting was unmistakable, and the message accompanying them, "Remember the dates," felt like both a clue and a challenge. Determined to unravel the mystery, Emily sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and began brainstorming. Mark arrived shortly after, carrying his laptop and a notebook filled with ideas. He had spent half the night researching paranormal phenomena and possible explanations for what they had witnessed at the cemetery. While he wasn't ready to declare it proof of life after death just yet, he admitted that the experience had left him shaken and curious. "All right," he said, setting his things on the table. "Let's figure this out. What do you think these numbers mean?" Emily spread the note out carefully, smoothing its edges. "I'm pretty sure they're dates," she replied thoughtfully. "Mom always marked important days, birthdays, anniversaries, milestones. Maybe these are references to specific moments in my life." Mark nodded, pulling up a calendar app on his laptop. "Let's start by breaking them down. Each set could represent a date, like April 2nd, March 1st, and February 8th, or maybe even years. Do any of those stand out to you?" Emily frowned, scrolling through memories in her mind. At first, nothing clicked. Then slowly, pieces began falling into place. April 2nd, she murmured, her eyes lighting up. That's the day I graduated high school. Mom was so proud of me, she cried during the ceremony. Mark jotted it down enthusiastically. Great, that's one down. What about March 1st? She thought harder, sifting through years of memories. March 1st. Oh, that's the day I got my first job at the library. It was part-time, but Mom acted like I'd won the lottery. She said it was the start of something big. Mark grinned. See? We're onto something here. And February 8th? This one took longer. February 8th didn't immediately trigger any significant events in Emily's memory. Frustrated, she leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Mark noticed her struggle and suggested looking through old photos or journals for clues. Sometimes we forget stuff unless we see it written down or pictured, he said encouragingly. Together, they rummaged through boxes of keepsakes stored in Emily's closet. Old report cards, birthday cards, concert tickets, all remnants of her childhood and teenage years. Finally, tucked inside an envelope labeled Family Memories. They found a faded photograph of Emily standing beside her mother on a snowy winter morning. On the back, written in her mother's neat handwriting, were the words, February 8th, Snow Day Adventure. A wave of nostalgia washed over Emily as she remembered that day vividly. It had been one of those rare snowstorms that transformed their small town into a winter wonderland. School had been canceled, and instead of staying indoors, her mother had bundled her up in layers of sweaters and scarves and taken her outside to build a snowman. They'd laughed until their cheeks hurt, throwing snowballs and making snow angels. It was one of the happiest days of Emily's childhood. That's it, she exclaimed, holding up the photo triumphantly. February 8th, the snow day. Mom loved that day too. She said it reminded her how magical life could be when you slowed down and enjoyed the little things. With all 3 dates identified, Emily felt a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. But the bigger question remained. Why had her mother chosen these particular days? What was she trying to tell her? Mark leaned forward, tapping his pen against the notebook. These aren't just random dates, he said thoughtfully. They're moments where you achieved something, started something new, or simply found joy. Your mom must have been reminding you of your strength, resilience, and ability to find happiness even in tough times. Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She always believed in me more than I believed in myself, she whispered. Even now, she's cheering me on. Encouraged by their progress, they decided to return to the cemetery that evening. This time, they planned to bring items related to each of the dates, a graduation cap for April 2nd, a library card for March 1st, and the snow day photo for February 8th. Their goal was to create a connection between the past and present, hoping it would strengthen their communication with whatever presence lingered near the grave. As dusk settled over the cemetery, Emily and Mark set up their equipment. Once again, the air was colder tonight, carrying the crisp scent of autumn leaves. Emily placed the items around the headstone, arranging them neatly alongside the teddy bear. She lit a small candle and stepped back, taking a moment to compose herself. Mom, she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. We figured out the dates. Thank you for reminding me of those special moments. I needed that. But if there's more you want to say, please show me. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The wind rustled through the trees and the cameras captured only the quiet stillness of the graveyard. Just as Emily started to wonder if they had misunderstood the message, the temperature dropped sharply. A faint glow appeared near the headstone, gradually forming into the familiar translucent figure. It moved closer this time, stopping directly in front of Emily. Her breath caught in her throat as the figure extended its hand, pointing toward the items she had brought. Then in a soft, echoing voice it spoke. You carry my love with you every day. Trust yourself. You have everything you need. Tears streamed down Emily's face as the figure dissolved into the night once more. Though no further explanation came, the message was clear. Her mother wasn't just reaching out to comfort her. She was urging her to embrace her own strength and potential. As they packed up their gear and headed home, Emily felt lighter somehow, as though a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying had finally lifted. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where grief wasn't the dominant force in her life. With her mother's guidance still alive in her heart, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead.